Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're stepping right back into the deep shadows of the Carpathian Mountains, picking up exactly where we left off in the ancient freezing halls of Bram Stoker's masterpiece. Now, I want you to listen closely as we unravel this mystery together, because every single detail here matters. The atmosphere is freezing cold, the night is just thick with fog, and our protagonist, Jonathan Harker, is about to face a truly terrifying truth.
Jonathan Harker had spent the night believing that Count Dracula was a strange but respectable man. For hours, he'd been sitting there rationalizing all the oddities of his host, convincing himself that this was just, eccentric nobility. But then, as he stood frozen at his bedroom window, he looked out into the moonlight, and literally everything changed.
Okay, let's dive into this. Imagine you're standing at a high window in an ancient stone castle, surrounded by absolutely nothing but jagged mountains. You look down, and you see your host, the Count himself, scaling down the sheer exterior wall, face first, like a creature that was never meant to be human. Jonathan just backs away from the window, his heart pounding out of his chest. The man he just broke bread with is out there doing the physically impossible.
And that is the exact moment it hits him. He was not a guest. He was a prisoner.
Part 1. The morning after.
So, when the sun finally comes up, Jonathan wakes up desperately hoping the whole thing was just a bad dream, a trick of the moonlight, right? Desperate for some sense of normalcy, he wanders out into the enormous, completely silent corridors looking for his host. Eventually, he finds Count Dracula just calmly waiting for him. And guys, this is where the psychological terror really kicks in. You'd expect a monster, right? But Dracula acts like absolutely nothing is wrong. He's polite, he asks about Jonathan's sleep, tells him to make himself at home. Jonathan is shaking on the inside, but as he looks around the castle, he immediately spots some deeply disturbing details. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how these specific clues totally strip away any illusion of safety. Think about a massive 19th century castle. They literally required dozens of people just to keep the lights on. Yet here, 0 servants, no other guests, no nearby houses for miles in any direction. And weirdly, every single door Jonathan tries is strangely heavy, almost like the castle itself is pushing back against him. All of this proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that he is entirely isolated.
Part 2. The Mirror and the Blood.
As we move into the shadowy afternoon, the suspense really ramps up. Jonathan goes back to his room to get ready for the day, and just the mundane act of shaving turns into this unforgettable moment of sheer terror. He sets up his kit, hangs a tiny mirror on the wall, the whole castle is dead quiet. And then, without a single footstep, without even a floorboard creaking, Dracula appears right behind him. Imagine the panic. You're in an empty wing of a silent castle, and someone manages to sneak up on you without making a single sound. So, the crucial point is what happens next. Jonathan jumps, totally startled, and looks back at the small mirror. And if you look closely at the reflection, Jonathan is right there. But behind him, nothing. Count Dracula's reflection is completely absent. This physically impossible moment just wrecks Jonathan's nerves. And when he stammers out a question about it, Dracula gives this bizarre deflective answer and aggressively takes the mirror right out of the room. But the tension in the room has already caused a major mistake. When he jumped, Jonathan slipped with the razor. Just a tiny cut on his neck. One single drop of blood. But that tiny drop completely shatters Dracula's polite, gentlemanly facade. It is instantly replaced by this intense, frightening, almost animalistic focus on the wound. Dracula lunges forward at terrifying speed, but then he suddenly stops. He catches himself just inches away and warns, "Be careful." The pure intensity in his eyes when he says those words leaves Jonathan trembling long after the Count actually walks out of the room.
Part 3. Exploring the Locked Doors.
Alone again, Jonathan's fear turns into full-blown panic. He realizes he has to get out of this stone prison right now. First, he sprints down these narrow, candlelit hallways, just pulling desperately at the interior doors. Locked. He tries another one. Locked. His panic is rising, so he runs all the way down to the grand main entrance and heaves at the massive iron handles. Locked tight. He spends hours scouring the walls for any other exit, and every single attempt fails. That's when the horrifying reality sets in. Dracula has deliberately trapped him.
So, why can't Jonathan just leave? Well, even if he could somehow break down those massive oak doors, look at where he is.
The castle is literally hanging on the edge of a cliff, completely swallowed by dark, foggy mountains. There is nowhere to run, and there is absolutely no one around to hear him scream.
Part 4. Dracula's strange routine.
And this brilliantly illustrates how Jonathan tries to cope. He turns to his journal. He starts documenting his host's impossible behavior, trying to force some kind of logic onto a totally illogical situation. Look at this timeline he puts together. Morning, the castle is a ghost town, Dracula is gone. Afternoon, the guy literally has no reflection. And at night, Dracula is roaming the shadows without making a sound. He never eats with Jonathan. He actually never eats at all. And he never sleeps. Jonathan came all the way to Transylvania to do a basic real estate deal. And now he is essentially taking field notes on a monster.
Part 5. The Wall Discovery.
Driven by this horrible mix of dread and morbid curiosity, Jonathan starts wandering the upper, forbidden levels of the castle. He finds a window looking out over the sheer drop into the valley. He realizes the stone walls are perfectly smooth. No human could possibly climb them. So is Dracula really human? As he looks out into the moonlight, he gets his final answer. He sees the Count again, crawling across the exterior wall, hovering over the abyss, completely defying gravity. Any tiny sliver of doubt Jonathan had is gone. His host is not a man. He slowly pulls the heavy curtain shut, steps backward into the dark room, and whispers to himself in absolute disbelief. What have I brought myself into?
Let's move to part 6 and see how this builds into the final suspense.
Okay, it is very late at night. The castle is pitch black. I want you to listen closely to how this plays out. Jonathan is sitting in the dead silence of his room when he hears this sound echoing from deep within the castle, a faint cry, then another. It sounds like someone begging for help. He creeps out into the pitch-black corridor, following the voice across the freezing stone floors. He finally reaches a heavy locked door, and the crying is coming from right behind it. Shaking, Jonathan reaches out and grips the cold iron handle.
And suddenly, a voice cuts right through the silence. "Why are you wandering through my house at this hour?" Jonathan freezes. That voice did not come from behind the door. It came from directly behind him. He slowly turns around, and there, standing silently in the pitch black, is Count Dracula.
So Jonathan knows for a fact that Dracula isn't human. He knows he is a prisoner with absolutely zero chance of escape. But as he stands there, frozen in the dark, staring into the eyes of his captor, he still hasn't uncovered the most terrifying secret of this castle. What is behind that locked door? What else is hiding in the dark with him? Well, that is a mystery we'll have to solve in the next explainer.